Today I'm going to show you how to make this very tasty recipe. Today I'm going to make chili beef stew. I decided to put together a special recipe because I have just been hankering for a stew just like this. I can taste it already on my palate. You know what I do, recipe development. I put together recipes and I'm good at it. And this one has all the right elements. It's going to be done just the right way, and the flavors come now. The flavors are going to be incredible. This is simple, easy cooking. It's slow cooking. This works in a crock pot if you decide you want to do it that way. This is going to be a chili beef stew. We're going to be using poblano chilies and a few other good things. Now let me explain to you. If you're thinking this is chili, it's not. This is not like Texas red chili or anything like that. This is, where chili is spice rich. This stew is very little spice in it, very lacking in spice. It gets all of its flavor from the food we're going to put into it and from the cooking method, which is called braising. Braising is where you are cooking in liquid at low temperatures. And if you think that a crock pot does better than that, well, that's what a crock pot is doing. Crock pots cook between 200 and 300 degrees. They usually, most people cook with some liquid in them, and that's called braising, ladies and gentlemen. So plain and simple. That's the reason they develop such good food. Braising has long been called the king of cooking because it's the method that brings out the richest, most intense flavors of all. It's really cool. Now this dish is going to be fun. Before we get in there, I want to mention when we're finished with this tutorial, and by the way, if you're watching this tutorial version, the recipe, which is a shorter version, is right before this. This shows techniques and stuff like that. That's a little more detailed. Before we get in there, let me mention, at the end of the video, go to my website. You're going to be able to get the written recipe for this. If you'll do yourself a favor and do what I've done here, get a little 3-ring binder, print these things out on decent paper. I used a brochure paper, nothing expensive. It was 2-sided glossy brochure paper. Makes a fantastic recipe printed, just like that. Okay, so here's what I'm recommending, that you take a look at that after this, and if it's something that you think you would like, consider that. Also, if you would, when we're finished with this, in the description box, all of the links for this, for the rest of Texas cooking today, lots of good recipes. We're going to get in the kitchen now, take a look at the ingredients, and I want to get busy making a really good stew. Let's go, come on. A beautiful lineup of goodies for this recipe, and it starts right over there with the beef. That's 2.5 pounds of beef chuck that I started with. You'll see what we do with that in a minute. And we put to that a whole bunch of poblanos. Also, crushed tomatoes, cumin, beef broth, onions, garlic, and some salt. And together, combined and slow cooked, this is deliciousness right here. Let's get into cooking this thing up. We have to dice these out, and dice out that meat. So it's a little bit of knife work, and we're on to cooking. Okay, we're going to process our chilies. Now let me mention to you first of all, when you're out shopping for a chili, and here's what I look for when I'm looking for good poblanos. All right, when you're shopping for poblanos or pretty much any chili, the place that they start to rot the first is right on the tip. So look at the tip. If you see any rot going on there, you know that whether it has a green stem or not, that chili has got issues, all right? So watch for that. And then again, on the stem itself, the stems, if it's a fairly fresh chili, are going to be like this. They're going to be green and firm, and that's just a nice thing to look for. So it makes for a good chili. What we're going to do on these today is very simple. All I want to do is simply open them up, take out the cores, just like that. Wasn't that easy? Poblanos don't have much inside of them, all right? So I can get a few extra seeds out. Most of the seeds are gone, and when you slice one of these things open, and do this, as you can see, what's inside, just not a whole lot. So the few seeds that are there, you can just push them out with your fingers. Don't worry, these things aren't very hot. All right, now if you feel more comfortable wearing gloves, go ahead and wear gloves, and it's a good practice when cooking, when working with chilies. You know, as far as the foodborne pathogen thing, very smart idea. But that's how you get started on those. So go ahead and get all of your chilies to that point, and we'll move on to the next step, which is slicing them up, okay? And before I get into cutting up all of these poblanos, which have been halved and crowned, I want to mention a little bit of knife safety before we go any further on this. When it comes to being careful with big knives like this, you know, the ones that have a blade that is wide like this and is offset from the handle like so. A blade like this has a tendency to want to spin or turn in your hand sometimes. And you may have experienced that where you're cutting along and suddenly, bam, the blade is flipped over and moving in a direction you don't want it to. And what I'm about to teach you will stop that. So instead of holding it like this, like so many people do, let's change our grip. So we're pinching the blade here. Okay, so we use these two fingers to pinch, wrap these fingers around, and suddenly that blade will not rotate. I'm trying to twist it and it won't happen because it can't turn in my hand now because of the way I'm holding it. So that's the first thing you need to know as far as knife safety. Proper way to hold that knife. Next, cutting chilies. If you cut from the outside, sometimes if your knife isn't really sharp, it's hard to cut through that outer skin. And it makes it easier if you just turn it over and very gently cut through those. And if you'll notice, I like to use a simple stroking motion when I'm doing this. I find it very easy to cut through a chili this way. And when we're finished, we're going to take all of the chilies that we cut and we're going to dice them up. Now before I go any further there, I want to talk about that hand technique, how we're holding our chili down. When you're holding that chili, turn the hand under. I was using my thumb, or excuse me, my finger right here, that knuckle, as a guide for my knife, all right? And it was working because my fingertips are turned under. I won't cut my fingers cutting like this, all right? Very smart to do that. You notice the thumb is behind the fingers down here, just kind of holding on to this thing. The next thing is when you have stuff like this, that same technique, which is this crab technique, works. Simply, instead of being on top, simply pull your hand over to the side a little more with the pinky on the board, and it keeps this stuff from moving as you're cutting it, all right? So it controls the movement of these, as well as you've got control of the thumb behind, and that'll keep it from kind of jumping around back here. And then we can just come up to, there's my finger, boom, using it as a guide, come back a little further. Now each time I move my hand back just a little bit like this, boom, cut, moving it back, cut. And so that's how I dice out simple chili like that. All right, and that's what you want to do to all of these. We have perfect diced chilies. I want to do all of these chilies the exact same way. So if you would, just have at yours and throw everything into a bowl as you go, okay? I've already finished the dice on my chilies, and if you notice, those are some really big dice going on there, and that's just perfect because we're looking, that's what this is about. It's about the beef and it's about the chilies. Boom, this. The onion just adds a little flavor, but this is the main character right here. So we want it to look special. Again, holding the knife the right way, we're going to cut the onion right down the middle, just like so. I have now two halves. Now the technique that I have shown people for years on how to dice an onion involves cutting through it this way. And that's fine. You know, you make a cut this way and then some cuts this way, and then you cut your dice and they come out perfect. All right, this technique is a little bit easier, I think, and every bit as fast. Okay, so I quartered my onion. Now I take my little quarters and plunge the knife straight down, just like that, okay? And then I roll it over to complete cuts on this side of the same type. There and there. Now what that did is it busted apart that onion. See those nice little squares I have going on there? And I can then, when I cross cut this, I get beautiful dice as a result. So boom, boom, boom. And folks, by the way, that makes it really quick too. If you need a quick way to do your onion, that's how. All right? And once you get used to dicing this way, I guarantee you, you will never go back to any other method because it's just too doggone quick. Oops, there we go. And very little, very, very little waste. Well, onion's done. The peppers are done. Now, the garlic. There we go. Just give them a nice firm push. We need to break apart some of this because I need several of these cloves. Now, these are some pretty small cloves right here, but you know what? They're going to let me teach the same lesson, all right? And that lesson is this. When it comes to getting that final layer of paper off of that garlic clove right there, you don't have to crush it or anything. All you have to do is just gently flex from side to side just a little bit. You'll hear the paper crackle. There we go. And when that happens, that paper, a stubborn one, there we go, that paper slips off of it, boom, we've got a naked clove right there. And that's all there is to it. So enjoy this technique because it will help you to strip down your garlic really, really fast. And the neat thing is you can do your garlic in advance, have those cloves sitting aside. You didn't get oil on your fingers or on your counter or anything else because you never broke it open, okay? Folks, we have chuck meat right here, and chuck has a tendency to come apart right where the muscles are joined together. It does so real easily, which makes dividing it up kind of easy right there, see? And then there's another muscle, actually a group of them here and here, on this side of this one. There we go. So the reason I'm doing this and the reason I'm dividing it along the muscles, it makes it a lot easier for me to grab a hold of that fat and just very gently work it away from me. Now you notice how I have my knife and I'm cutting towards the wall? Don't ever do that same thing like this, okay? Because this right here is called a suicide cut. Never turn your knife this way in your hand. Cut like this, or if you're left-handed, cut like this. I don't want to touch it because my hand's got meat juices on it. So there we have it. Very simple. Keep your knife headed the right direction. Now I don't have to cut all this fat off. A lot of this fat can be some really good food to put down into that pot, okay? And it's going to render through real nice. There's a little connective tissue between those two muscles. Now, earlier when I mentioned that we were going to dice these fairly small, I meant exactly that. So I'm making some strip cuts here. Go ahead. It looks like right under this side right there, got just a little bit of that silver skin left. Go ahead and cut that off and be done with it. Alrighty. So what I'm trying to do here is cut about a 1/4 inch thick piece of meat. So it's not like real super large pieces of meat, alright? And then I'm going to take these smaller pieces like this, and this one that's kind of wide, we're going to narrow it. There we go. Narrow this one up a little, just like that, and then making dice. So the dice I'm making are kind of small. You know, that's not like a huge chunk of beef. It's not like you would see in a large hearty stew. This one's going to be a beautiful stew that has meat chunks that are reasonably sized, not big chunks that you bite and chew on, but something that's a little more tender and easy to work in the mouth. And so I wanted small pieces, and I also wanted the meat to have, the dish to have a texture that's unique because of the way I cut the meat. My pot here over a high heat, and I have my meat in it and I am browning it.
Now there's a couple of ways this dish can be done. One of them is throw everything in the pot, put the pot in the oven at 250 degrees, come back several hours later and you've got beautiful stew, okay? That's one way of doing it. Another way is put it in a big crock pot. Cook it up that way. Same exact technique. What I'm doing here is developing a little flavor in advance. I'm browning the meat. I'm going to add the onions and the peppers into it a little bit here, and we're going to get those cooking with it. And once we get a little bit of browning action happening and some flavor development going on, then we'll put everything else in there and then start cooking it. Now, when it comes to braising, you can braise on the stovetop. It's a little less common. It's basically stewing at that point, okay? Because the temperatures are a little higher on the stovetop because the flame is continuous. It's constantly putting out regular heat. So we put it in the oven to get controlled heat at a lower temperature. Braising happens between 200 and 300 degrees. The higher the temperature, the faster it works, but the less of the complex flavors you get. The lower the temperature, the longer it takes, but much, much more beautiful, rich, complex flavors come as a result. So it's your choice. You get to kind of play with it a little bit. I recommend doing a little of this right here, which is flavor development to begin with, and then a slow cook to follow that. Okay? Once it's ready, and only it can tell you. And your meat will be tender, it'll be kind of thickened up, and of course the house will smell beautiful. And that's how you know. Look at that. We have a little pink, mostly brown. Let's get her done. Oh yeah. Uh-oh, there I go, stealing someone else's phrase. Yep, sorry about that. It's a southern thing, all right? Put that together. Now this is where we start having a little fun with this and we start building flavors. So what I'm going to do is cover this, allow that to cook together for about 5 minutes, and I'm going to put in the chilies and do the same thing again for an additional 10 minutes. All right. Isn't that beautiful? Look what's happening there. This is what we call flavor development right here. And it's a wonderful, wonderful thing. So now, for our namesake, right there. There we go. Now, while I think cast iron cookware is cool, you know, and I love my Dutch oven here, I have to say this: make sure you use hot pads or a towel when handling it, because the handles get real hot. The whole thing gets hot. It's a very heat conductive material and it works well. There we go. So 10 minutes like this. There we are. Looky there. Absolutely beautiful. The smell, oh wow, that smells really good. Now I want to mention something. This is an important thing. When you're doing stewing like this, you need acid in here. There's a lot of ways to get acid in there. You could throw a bunch of lemon juice in there. You could put wine in there. I like using tomatoes in a lot of occasions. Okay, and this is just one of those occasions where tomatoes is the one that wins out. There we go. I want to get some beef broth right there. Now the beef broth, that's just used to hydrate things, okay? That gives us basically a sauce that's going to get cooked down and thickened, okay? And it adds flavor as we're doing it. Why not just throw a little more of the same flavor in there, right? This is starting to look really, really good. I want to put in about a teaspoon of salt. I'm going to put in 2 teaspoons of the cumin. And I measure this in my hand most of the time. That's about a teaspoon right there. Actually, it's about 1 1/4 teaspoons. So about 3/4 of a teaspoon to make up for it right there. Boom. And that's the cumin. The cumin's nice. It lends itself very well to a dish like this. Works superbly well with beef and with chilies, and also in tomato products. And cumin adds that true kind of Texas flavor, as it were. That flavor that you see that runs across a lot of our dishes, our chilies, our beans, and stuff like that, all have that kind of that dry, earthy flavor, and it comes from that cumin. I'm going to put my garlic in this, and it's going to be a simple thing. As I always do, I just take off that little callus where it was attached to the clove, and that way, or I should say where the cloves were attached to the bulb, and were part of the root at one time. There we go. Right there. Now these little gems, just need to crush them and throw them in there. And the crushing just simply allows it to release itself a little easier. And if you'll notice, I don't try to do them all at once. That can be kind of difficult. And this will prevent me from having any larger white chunks in the stew later. I don't need anything more than just a coarse breakup like that. Nice. Oh, there we go. This, at this point, I believe this is ready to go down in the oven. It is ready to hit the oven. I love this part. It's where I get to relax. All right. Okay. Now, give it time, folks. Here's how you know when it's ready. You come in, you check it. Open the lid in a couple of hours. You taste it. If the meat is tender and it is the right flavor, go with it. If the meat is still needing to be cooked a little longer, cook it a little longer. And that's how you can tell this, by how tender your meat has become. This is out of the oven. It was in there for almost 2 hours. I have a beautiful mixture here. I have it on the stove presently, simmering it. And what I want to do is, this has thickened up beautifully, but I want it to be just a little thicker than it is now. And I'm going to do that through a method of thickening. Now, some people do different ways of this. This is just one method of many, and it works well in this type of situation. I have an already made product here, and I simply need to make it thicker, and that is done by putting something in there that will expand. Cornstarch is good for that. So what I have here is 1/4 cup of cornstarch and a little over 1/2 cup of cold water. And all I need to do is put some of that cold water in there, not all, just enough to cover the cornstarch. Now at first, that cornstarch is going to sit to the bottom, and it's going to feel like it's not going to stir in. Just keep working it gently, and in a couple of minutes, it will simply dissolve right in. Okay? And cornstarch has some very, very interesting properties to it, in that it can be what's called a non-Newtonian fluid, meaning that if I make a thick cornstarch and water mixture, a really thick one, and I try to hit it or throw something into it, that it will be solid, like a, like a solid substance. However, I could gently push my hand down into it as if it were a fluid. And it's a very interesting property, so something that you might want to take a look at, and you can see some videos on the different properties of what's called oobleck, which is a mixture of water and cornstarch, what I have right here. Now this is a thin version of that. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to turn up my heat just a hair, just a little bit. I'm going to take this and get it stirred into this. There we go. And just almost immediately, there is a huge change in the quality and consistency of what I have there. Just instantly, I'm now floating in this beautiful deep gravy that doesn't seem nearly as viscous. So I now have this doing exactly what I want it to do.
going to simmer this just to cook off the cornstarch. Give it another 10 minutes. The quantity of everything that was used today started right over there with the beef. 2.5 pounds of beef chuck. Now when I finished cleaning it up, removing the fat, that was about 2 pounds of fine diced beef that I used. And to that, 2 pounds of poblanos, 1/2 pound of diced white onion, 4 to 6 cloves of garlic, 1 to 2 teaspoons of salt. This back here is 1.5 pounds or 3 cups of crushed tomatoes, 2 teaspoons of cumin, and 2 cups of beef broth. This is what we were going for right here. Isn't that beautiful? A wonderful chili beef stew. Chilies, beef, and a gorgeous gravy going with it. Now this is the kind of stuff that I absolutely love. This is good, hearty, stick to the ribs kind of food, as some folks like to call it. Yeah. There we go. Alrighty, now I want to get a little garnish on that. A nice little chili pepper to go with the namesake of this beautiful stew. This is a beautiful chili beef stew that came out exactly the way I was wanting it to. I'm looking forward to gobbling this up. All right. You know what? This isn't just a winter dish. This is year-round. This is just good quality, hearty food that has a load, and I do mean a load of nutrition. Perfect. You know, when the beef has just a slight amount of resistance and then it gives away. Perfect. Exactly what I was wanting. As you can see, the chilies are still distinguishable, but a lot smaller than when they started. So they do cook down quite a bit, and the flavor is not overwhelming. There is not a heat to this that's difficult to enjoy it. In fact, any heat to it is very, very mild, as a matter of fact. Oh yeah. I get to enjoy this in a minute, and I'm going to. Every bit of it. Thanks a lot for watching. Do me a favor, take a look in the description box down under this video, and right next to it, if you're not a subscriber, click subscribe and the bell so you know when my videos come out. Look in that box for descriptions, and you're going to see some links there for Texas Cooking Today, where you'll find all of my other recipes, as well as my website, where you're going to see the recipes for sale. I sell really nice quality recipes there, and so you get good quality for your money, and you get to choose which ones you want without having to buy a book. So take a look at that. Thank you very much. Please enjoy your chili beef stew. And I certainly will too. Bye-bye. I'm rhyming today.